My name is Molly Gavriel. I'm from the Developer Society, and I'm joined today by my colleague Paul Evans, who will be here for the discussion later. And the Developer Society is the world's first not-for-profit team of developers and designers run by and for the non-profit sector. So we build websites, digital applications, we do things like branding, infographics, data visualization, but we work exclusively with charities and non-profit organizations. And our mission is to use technology to make the world a better place. So just a bit of housekeeping, where Alison's done a great job of this. So firstly, everything is recorded and also translated. But also I'm going to share these slides. So there's some resources in here and everything we shared afterwards. So firstly, let's just start with the fundamentals. So what is digital accessibility? And rather than focusing on the digital element, because that's just really the tool we're using for communicating, let's focus on access. And as one example that we might think about in our day-to-day lives, a ramp allows wheelchair users to access a building, but it also allows someone with a buggy to access a building. So when we're thinking about the ramp, the core element of what it does is it allows people to have step-free access to a building. Another example, focusing here on digital and how we might use communications, is that the average reading age of a deaf adult is 9. And so simplifying written content will make it more accessible for deaf people. However, and I'm sure many people in the room and people who are using translation services, this also will benefit people who've got English as a second language, who are learning English perhaps for the first time, or people with a lower reading age in general. It makes life easier for dyslexics, or anyone who needs to find information quickly and easily. So in your work, if you're working in communications in particular, I think that probably covers most of your audience. And so this is what we refer to as the halo effect of accessibility, and it's why it's so important for us as digital practitioners and people working in the non-profit sector. And so what's the why? Well, 15% of the global population experiences some form of recognized disability. But then on top of that, you've got people with temporary impairments. For example, someone who's broken their leg or lost their glasses. And then situational impairments, and that might be that person who's pushing the buggy up the ramp. So really, designing for accessibility is fundamental for usability. If you're creating something that's not accessible, you're communicating in a way that's inaccessible, it's not going to be usable, and the sort of size of the group who can't use it is going to vary, but for someone on some level, it won't be usable. But also, and this is what I think is personally really exciting, is that by designing for accessibility, we can drive innovation. And this is coming into our mission at Dev of making the world a better place, really, and how can we constantly be improving. So some things you might have heard of or you might be using that drive that were sort of developed with accessibility in mind include technology like voice recognition, live captioning that we're using here today, and also translation services have all been developed with accessibility in mind, that have gone on to have this wider benefit across society. So just a couple of other things to think about. When we're talking specifically about digital, is access to the internet. If somebody can't access the internet, then they're unable to access your services. So what impact does that have? What are the consequences of that? Then we have confidence using digital tools. So you noticed me earlier sort of questioning, can you see my slides? That sort of hints at my slight lack of confidence after all this time, and even though I'm someone who works in the digital sector. And then we have experience using digital tools. So I'm sure that most people in the room today probably found it much easier joining this Zoom call than they would have done maybe 2 years ago. And as designers and developers, we're often asked about golden rules. So when we're developing a website, people want to know what can they keep in mind, what's going to help them. And I guess the first thing we'd say is that accessibility is very much a process, not a plugin. It's something that you have to keep coming back to and checking and testing. But if you do want some golden rules, the first one is contrast. So making sure that you're having different contrasting colors and highlighting text in a clear way. Avoiding things like grayscale fonts or typefaces on grayscale backgrounds. Making sure that your content is clear and clearly defined, and that it's simple and intuitive to use. And people often talk about UX and UI in terms of digital, or maybe the information architecture of your website. But also you can provide information in different formats. So I think the team at the Science Council have done a fantastic job today of having the different translations available for live transcription. And the fact this will be recorded and I can provide my slides. So yes, some examples here might be putting captions on your videos, having written information to support images, and having images that have alt text, so a screen reader can effectively describe what that image is showing. And really the fundamental rule is that digital accessibility is about creating online systems and services that work for the largest number of people possible. And that means really it's about understanding who's using your website or service. And it's about understanding what their needs are. And it's about understanding how good design, elements of design can help you to meet their needs. So go back and start with the user experience, work out who's using your service, who's using your website, and then remove as many barriers to inclusion as it's possible for you to do so. And there's lots of free online resources that can help. And when I send this presentation around, that'll be a list of resources. But nothing is more valuable than experience. So make sure that you're testing things and talk to people. And then listen to what they're saying and listen to the feedback, because that lived experience is really valuable. And thank you.
So I suppose I would just add and reinforce some points that Molly has made. I'm actually disabled myself. I'm deaf in one ear, and so my journey through this subject of accessibility has morphed and changed dramatically over the years. I'm a classically trained typographer and designer. And for many years, accessibility was a thing that we kind of, it was a nice to have. It was a bolt on. It was a thing that we recognized as important, but we didn't prioritize it. And my journey, both personally and professionally, through the last 20 years of doing this thing and observing the industry change and evolve and understand what that is that accessibility is not just for people who have specific accessibility needs. To go back to the illustration that Molly used, that ramp into a shop, it makes it easier for everyone to access the shop. It's not just for the people who use wheels. It's literally for everybody who uses that thing. Accessibility is a benefit to all. And it's really easy to lose sight of that because we have that specific focus. Often we have that focus on people who have very specific and particular needs, which is why we think about it as access rather than just accessibility, because it is about making sure that your information is accessible, that people can access it, can understand it, can interrogate it in meaningful ways. But it's also actually just about when you lower that threshold, when you consider people who have issues when it comes to accessing that information, what you actually do is make that information more understandable, intelligible, interrogable to literally 100% of the people that access it. And so by approaching information and design and communication from that democratized kind of perspective, where you are deliberately throwing the gates and the doors open to a wider cross section of people. Literally everybody benefits from that. And we talk about deaf people as a really good example. One of the projects we worked on a little while ago meant that we went along to a studio of accessibility experts, where almost the entire spectrum of accessibility need was represented in the room. And what they did, they were given a list of tasks to do on a website that we had designed and built, and each one of them basically went through and documented all of the issues that they had doing that thing. And they went from people that are in that kind of audience group that are more easily identified in that sense, people who have kind of access with issues with reading and visibility barriers. But they go right the way through people who have mobility access issues, people with like motor neuron disease as an example, who use dictation controls to manage their web browser and the applications on their website, right the way through to deaf people. And that for me was a massive eye-opener. At the point where we did that, I was starting my journey into going deaf. And I literally had tears rolling down my cheeks. The realization that I, as a designer, had gotten in the way of people who had accessibility needs, and that realization that it was just like, you know what, this is real, this is important. People who are deaf, as the example, that they are speaking in a wholly different language. If you're a British Sign Language speaker, BSL speaker in the UK, as we are, it's like you are a French speaker or any other given language is your first language, and English and written English is a secondary language. It's not your primary tongue, and we take that for granted, and it's a misunderstanding. But that for me rendered in excruciating clarity the fact that actually we have to take this seriously, that the clearer that we can make any one thing that we are saying to people, the clearer not only do we make it for people who are in this much broader spectrum of what you might frame as accessibility needs, you make it accessible to literally everyone. So that would be my encouragement, is that while we think of accessibility as being a niche field of interest in terms of design, user interface design and user experience design, that those labels that we use, UI and UX, it's actually something that puts information more clearly, more succinctly, more transparently in the hands of other people, a wider constituency of people, and it empowers them. It puts them in control of their experience of accessing that information and then absorbing it. So that's the lens that we look at accessibility through, and therefore it's entirely relevant and germane to the subject of today's discussions, and therefore it's an area of expertise that can level up any and all of the things that we're here to talk about. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking it seriously, because it's a hugely important area that we're really passionate about, and we think that everybody can benefit from. Thank you.